I got a buddy who recommends books to me, and I recommend books to him. And usually we know each other pretty well. We recommend books that the other one's going to like. But a while back, he recommended one to me that he knew I would not probably like, but that he thought would be good for me. So begrudgingly, because he reads whatever I ask him to read, I read whatever he asks me to read, I went and read the book. The book is called Getting to Yes. It came out in the early to mid-'80s. It was written by Roger Fisher and William Ury. U-R-Y. Not sure I'm saying that right. I got the audiobook of this, and then eventually I bought the physical book as well because I liked it so much. And I didn't initially. I was put off by all of the negotiation language. I didn't like the way the book sort of assumed that so much of human interaction is about negotiating. It just felt slick and overly businessy to me on the front end. But the more I listened to what these guys had to say, the more I realized that they're just trying to provide good tools for working out very complex things between people who want different stuff, but also want to arrive at what they hope to achieve peaceably and with relationships intact on the other end and with integrity and honor. And the tools that they ended up describing in here were just, they're life-changing, incredibly helpful. I highly recommend this book, even if it sounds off-putting and weird to you like it did to me on the front end. I love the way this book urges an orientation of negotiating from the same side of the table. We have a problem here. That is, there's more than one person involved in the equation and they want different things. Cool. How do we solve the problem? And it's been really fun for me to get to tackle some negotiations since then and to be more considerate of the people I'm talking to in new ways. And it's a very helpful book. I don't want to review the whole thing right now. I hope someday it bleeds over into maybe how we do political discourse, public discourse again in our country. I just found it to be so very civilizing and so very fruitful. And because I went through the audio book and then I bought the physical book, I've been through it a couple of times and it's really in my brain right now, I can't help but see it as we get to the end of Nehemiah chapter 10. And I'm looking back at all of the negotiating in this book. Now, I think you and I, as we go through the book of Nehemiah, are getting the results of the negotiations primarily. But there had to have been so much stuff that went on in the background behind these pages to get to a place where there would be such unity over such potentially divisive stuff. Now, look, the negotiation process never really happened with the enemies of Nehemiah and the rebuilders of Jerusalem, the rebuilders of the wall. Nehemiah rightly assessed that those enemies were not what Fisher and Uri call good faith negotiators. They were negotiating in bad faith. They were pulling stunts and tricks, and they were being very deceptive about what they were trying to get out of their quote-unquote negotiation with Nehemiah on the front end of the book of Nehemiah. And Nehemiah was brilliant. He was around the best negotiators in the world, being from the royal palace and being witness, being privy, a fly on the wall to all kinds of the highest stakes negotiating that happened in the royal throne room back out east in Susa in the court of Artaxerxes. This guy was clearly brilliant. These dudes who are trying to outwit Nehemiah, they're small potatoes. They're minor league. Nehemiah's a major league player. And so those negotiations never go anywhere, but it's not because Nehemiah's a jerk. It's because Nehemiah is well-traveled and talented, and he knows a fraud and a bad faith actor, that is, when he sees it. And so Sanballat and all of those guys, that's not really a negotiation because they were dishonest, disingenuous in their negotiation. But where the negotiation really gets cooking is with the in-house discussions between Nehemiah and the other Jewish people. I mean, think about what's going on here. People moved back. They're used to the plush, comfy lifestyle of Persia. We know that when the exiles returned to Jerusalem, they wanted to build their fancy houses. We also know that Jerusalem was a dump. And they didn't want to live in Jerusalem. They were used to Susa or Babylon or Ecbatana or wherever. Jerusalem's like a reclamation project. It's dirty. It's smelly. The public works, to whatever degree those existed at this point, were, even if they were still in good repair, which they probably weren't, they were 200-year-old technology. Do you want 200-year-old toilets in your house? Well, probably not. And so nobody wanted to be around it. And so they're trying to figure out, how do we even populate this city? Whose resources are we going to use? And so Nehemiah is having to negotiate with moneyed people and not moneyed people about who's going to physically do the work of rebuilding the walls, who's going to risk their families, young men, to defend the walls. There had to have been negotiation about what businesses were closed for how long during this process of weeks to get things done. And then, as I was just alluding to, there's got to be this negotiation about how we're going to repopulate the city and who's going to live here. Additionally, this stuff that we just looked at in Nehemiah 10 over the last few days of the ratification of the covenant, I don't think that all the people who we sang about in the Names in Nehemiah Ratifiers of the Covenant song the other day, I don't think they all just got together and knew the dance steps and spontaneously, miraculously said together without any planning whatsoever this elaborate multi-paragraph covenant that would be binding for life because miraculously it was just all given to them. No, I think that what we're getting here between Nehemiah 10:28 and the end of the chapter, all those provisions about not intermarrying and the Sabbath and how you do business and providing for the temple and even laborers for the temple, all of that stuff, I think that got ground through with difficult conversations amongst powerful people and probably also with the heads of some households who were on a downswing economically and in terms of status during this time. Clearly, the tone of all of the book of Nehemiah is such that Nehemiah and Ezra as well are trying to restore the people. They're trying to get the people on their feet. They're not always going to have Nehemiah and Ezra around to make things work. They're not always going to have the political wind in their sails in terms of what's going on back in Susa. They're not always going to have the favor of the king, the emperor, Artaxerxes. So they're trying to build this thing for the long haul. And somewhere behind the pages of this, we only get a couple of little glimpses in the places where like Nehemiah tells off some of the bad faith negotiators who were economically exploiting their fellow countrymen. But somewhere behind these pages, there was intense, multifaceted negotiation with a ton of people at the table. And the fact that they got to this kind of resolution tells me that Nehemiah and whoever was helping with these negotiations were incredibly talented people. They were empathetic. They had moral credibility in the eyes of the people they were talking with. The people they were talking with believed that Nehemiah was being fair, or they never could have arrived at these kind of conclusions that affect people all the way up and down the socioeconomic scale. If you're wondering, like, is today seriously just about celebrating the invisible negotiations that made this incredible achievement of the renewal of the covenant possible? Is today really just about stopping to appreciate that? Oh, yes, it is, my friend. Yes, it is. Because while I might not say this is a miracle, I would say it is an elite, remarkable, high-level, unique, special moment in the history of human negotiation that all of these people with all of these divergent interests came together, saw the playing field the same way, trusted each other enough to even have the conversations, let alone to arrive at agreeable conclusions for everybody. And then they all went back to their households and said, this is what we're going to do. And then they all walked out in front of everybody and said the words together and bound themselves, not in contract, not in terms of service click, but in covenant. So here's a few random people I would like to give a high five to. Hodiah, his name's on the list. Halahesh, his name's on the list. Great job, dude. You are an honest negotiator, and you deserve honor for that. How about Harim? How about Amariah? Great job, everybody. How about Elam? How about Parosh? And I don't know, let me just pick one more person at random from this list. Do you remember any of the names of the people who ratified the covenant off the top of your head? I mean, there was obviously Nehemiah the governor, and the names I just listed. You know what? This is crazy. I just happened to remember one more name off the top of my head without even looking, and it's Bana. I think we should celebrate Bana, who was also a good faith negotiator and who helped to make this thing happen. I'm not even joking. I don't think we should take this lightly. I think this is an amazing achievement, and I would invite you to think about what it would take with tens, 20s, 50s, hundreds of thousands of people in your community or in your area to come together with an accord like this and to articulate it with unanimity. I mean, really, what kind of negotiating would that take? What would it take right now in your world to get your entire community to agree on anything? Any single one thing. Anything. I don't know if that's possible in my country right now. I don't know how you would even pull that off. So this is a really amazing moment, and tip of the hat to the unseen heroes behind the scenes who laid down their personal claims and their personal rights and who set aside beefs that they had that were probably completely valid. I don't even want to minimize them. There were people who had legitimate gripes with other people on this list of names, and they set that aside for something that was much bigger and much more important. There's just a lot of cool stuff that happened behind the scenes here in order for them to get to yes. Props to all of them for getting it done. Next time around, on to Nehemiah chapter 11. All right, I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. Let's do this again soon.